The question is, if a person is involved in a road traffic accident and they are unconscious in hospital, can the police test them for drink driving? Well, the short answer is yes, they can, but let's look at the different types of tests that the police may or may not be able to do. The first one is a preliminary breath test or a roadside breath test. That can't be done when somebody's unconscious for obvious reasons. There might be a scenario where the police were able to test somebody at the roadside before they became unconscious, if that were practicable, but that's going to be a fairly rare occurrence. Second type of test is the evidential breath test. That has to be done on the big breath test machine, which the police have in the police station. It can't be done in hospital. And anyway, you can't perform a breath test on somebody who is unconscious for the same practical reasons you can't do the preliminary test. So a breath test is pretty much out of the question for all cases where somebody is in hospital, whether they're conscious or unconscious. Now, in normal circumstances, if the police go to hospital and they want to take a blood sample from somebody, they have to obtain medical consent from that person to give the sample. If that person doesn't give consent, they could be prosecuted for failing to provide a specimen. But normally the police will need the consent. Now, when somebody is unconscious, then it's impossible for them to give consent. So the police would have to get authorization from the doctor in charge, and then they can take a blood sample without consent. But they can't use that blood sample, or they can't send that sample off to be tested in the laboratory unless the patient or the suspect gives their consent to the police. So the police will have to wait until the person regains consciousness. Then they ask for their consent, or they in fact require them to give consent. If the person gives consent, then the sample will go off to the lab. If the person does not give consent, then it's likely that that person will be prosecuted for failing to provide a specimen. Often the consequences of that are the same, if not worse, than they are for drink driving in the first place. And the only other type of sample the police might take will be a urine sample. There is no power to take a urine sample from somebody who is unconscious, so they would not be able to do that. So the answer to the question is yes, the police can take a sample of blood without the person's consent if they are unconscious, and they will then have to go and obtain medical consent afterwards.